Hello, economics students. Today we are going to be looking at demand shifters. This is Learning Target 2C in your packet. I can identify and graphically illustrate the factors that lead to shifts in demand. Now, this cartoon is kind of funny because there's somebody that's trying to sell snow cones in an area where somebody lives in basically a snow house. So trust me, Harold, it's not or demand, it's supply and demand. Demand is pretty important. So what is a change in demand? It is anything that alters the quantity demanded at every price. It is a shift in the demand curve, either to the left or to the right. So I'm going to be showing you some graphs, and we're going to look at some things that can cause a shift in the demand curve. So basically, if we have the price of snow cones, this is our demand curve, our primary demand curve. If we have an increase in overall demand, let's say it's a hot day and or a hot summer in Minnesota, we might have an entire increase in demand in snow cones. If we have a decrease in demand, let's say it's really cold all summer long, and you know what, there just is not the demand for snow cones, that's going to move the curve to the left. If we take a look at $1 as the price point and you go across here, at $1 you would make about 100 at the normal demand curve. If you instead go here, you'll see that the quantity demanded would be more like 50 at $1 if the demand curve decreases. And if the demand curve indeed increases and moves to the right, you're going to have 150 quantity of snow cones that's going to be demanded. So what we're talking about here is the quantity demanded. We'll be looking at shifters of supply later on. So if we start on the D curve, what is the original quantity demanded for snow cones at $1? I already talked about this. You just follow that line straight up from the dollar across, and then you go down and you see 100. If there's an increase in demand to D1, it's 150. And if you have a decrease in demand to $1, it's 50 snow cones. Okay, so what is going to be a demand shifter? Use the acronym TIRES to remember this. Tastes and preferences of customers. We talked about Furbies the other day. So Furbies might become a preference for consumers, whatever's driving that. If the overall income of consumers increases, that's going to increase the demand. Something that might cause a shift in the demand are related goods, so substitutes and complements, and I'll talk about what those are later. We might have the E, expectations of future price changes, and S, the size of the population market. So let's talk about tastes and preferences of consumers. As people's tastes change in favor of a good, or perhaps an effective advertising campaign has been waged, the demand is going to shift to the right. In recent years, a lot of people have found out that they are lactose intolerant. As a result of that, certain kinds of lactose-free milk, like almond milk, have increased in demand. So almond milk, the demand curve for that has shifted to the right, and it would be represented in the top chart by the line D1. As people's tastes change against a good, or it loses popularity, demand decreases or shifts to the left. So as we talked about in class, the demand for the Furbies has gone down. Not as many people are buying them anymore because they don't prefer them. Perhaps there's something else that they prefer. So their demand curve is going to have moved to the left. So when Michael Jordan began endorsing Nike products and Gatorade, both the demand for Nike and Gatorade increased. And one of the reasons why is because Michael Jordan has star power and people want to be like him. And if he likes Nike shoes or he likes Gatorade, then it must be good for us too. So that's an example of an effective ad campaign. So I'd like you to just stop for a second and think of how your tastes or preferences have changed for a product. So, for example, is there something that you used to like that you no longer like anymore? It could be a food, it could be an item of clothing, or something that you used to collect that you don't really care about anymore. Okay, income of consumers will also affect the demand curve. So as our overall income increases, general consumer demand for goods and services increases, so it shifts to the right. As income decreases, consumer demand for goods and service decreases, shifts to the left. Some households in America during the pandemic had income decreases and consumer demand, especially for things that would be considered optional goods or services, decreased or shifted to the left. Here's an example. When Billy got laid off from his job, his demand for gourmet steak dinners decreased. Ooh, that does look good, I have to admit. Related goods and substitutes. So if two goods are substitutes, when the price of good A increases, demand for good B increases. It shifts to the right. If two goods are substitutes, when the price of good A decreases, demand for good B decreases or shifts to the left. So here we're talking about two goods that are relatively similar. And let's look at the example here. So if you have Starbucks or Caribou, demand for one or the other will shift as they shift their prices. So let's say Caribou decides they're going to charge less than Starbucks for their coffee. The whole demand curve for Caribou is going to shift to the right, and people are going to want to go to Caribou because they're going to get really good coffee just like they would at Starbucks, but they're going to get it for less money. So that curve is going to shift to the right. At Starbucks, the demand for that will go down and it will shift to the left. So let's imagine that tea and hot cocoa are substitutes. If the price of tea decreases, then the demand for hot cocoa also decreases. Is this true or false? Well, the answer is if the price of tea decreases, the demand for hot cocoa will decrease because of the demand for tea will go up. Okay, so continuing, related goods or complements. This is with an E, complements. If two goods are complements, that means one goes with the other. Tennis rackets use tennis balls, for example. So if two goods are complements, when the price of good A increases, the demand for good B is going to decrease or shift to the left. So if tennis rackets become super expensive and fewer people are playing tennis, then the demand for tennis balls is going to go down. If two goods for complements are complements, when the price of good A decreases, demand for good B will increase or shift to the right. So likewise, if you have tennis rackets becoming really affordable and you have tennis courts that are open, then the demand for tennis balls is going to go to the right. So let's take a look at a hamburger and ketchup. It's really the hamburger that is the primary good here, and it is going to affect the demand for ketchup because that's what the condiment is primarily used for, is for a hamburger or for hot dogs. So if the demand for hamburger, or the price for hamburgers rather, fluctuates, in other words, let's say the price goes down and it becomes really, really affordable, then the demand for ketchup is actually going to go which direction? Increase or decrease? Well, it's actually going to go to the right. It's going to increase because more people are eating hamburgers. at a lower price, and therefore the demand for ketchup will increase. So, related goods example, if the price of skis goes up, the demand for ski poles decreases. So think about that for a second. If the price of skis goes up, we're going to have fewer people buying skis, and therefore we will have fewer people buying ski poles. So the answer to that one is true. So a question is this a complementary good or a substitute? So cars and tires are which? Substitutes or complements? I'm going to ask you to go through each of these and think about whether they are substitutes or complements. And that is actually going to be your ABA for today, is to go through each of these and identify whether they are substitutes or complements. Expectations of future price changes. If consumers expect the price of a good to rise in the future, so let's say they hear that there is going to be a shortage of cars next year, then the demand for cars this year might go up. So that is an example of a demand curve shifting to the right. If consumers expect the price of a good to decrease in the future, immediate demand decreases or shifts to the left. So if we've heard some news that perhaps there is a new supply of toilet paper coming to our stores next month, and supposing we have enough to make it till next month, then we're going to wait till next month to buy it, and the immediate demand will shift to the left. So demand for gas changes throughout the week. Oftentimes people will follow price changes in gasoline, and this is something that perhaps you don't do yet, but on nightly reports, oftentimes they'll talk about the price of oil per barrel has gone down or has gone up. So when the price of oil we know is going to go down, that means that at the gas pump next week or later this week, the price is going to go down. So let's say we have a quarter tank and we know it's going to go down in the next few days. Well, we might just wait to fill our tanks. So the demand curve is going to shift to the left. The size of the population market. So as the number of consumers in a given market increases, demand is going to shift to the right. As the number of consumers in a given market decreases, demand is going to shift to the left. This is pretty intuitive, but let's talk about an example here. Girl Scouts was really, really popular when I was a young girl. And this is exactly what we wore. We had a vest that we put our badges on. Some troops had a sash that went across the chest from the shoulder down to the waist, and we would sew our patches on. So Girl Scouts has been around forever. I was a Girl Scout leader for my daughters, but it is not as popular as it once was. So it is probable that the demand for Girl Scout patches has gone to the left, that it has gone down. If more girls were to join Girl Scouts and it were to become really popular, the demand would shift to the right. So here are variables that influence buyers. Price. This just represents a movement along the demand curve, so keep that in mind. These other things here are the things that we've talked about, and they are all going to shift the demand curve. So super important to know this difference. Demand shifters, or this acronym TIRES, cause a change either to the right, increasing the demand curve, or to the left, decreasing the demand curve. Change in price of the product changes only the quantity demanded of that product. So keep that in mind. This is a big difference, and you must know this difference. So tomorrow we're going to be looking at headlines, and we're going to be practicing demand shift. For those of you who are in class, we'll be doing this in class. For those of you who are at home, you will be, I'll be directing you to the URL that is on the PowerPoint, and you'll look at the headlines and you will be completing this handout for the ABA for that day. So once again, your ABA for today is to go to this slide and identify which is the substitute S or complement C. And I will be putting that as an assignment on your ABA. Thank you for your time. Good night.